Free. This week's episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer with Randy Davis, my special guest is Bruce Richman, the founding executive director of the Prevention Access Campaign, the U equals U movement. Stay tuned, it's going to be a great one. Welcome to another episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer with Randy Davis. On tonight's episode, we're focusing all on the message and movement of U equals U, a message that is very near and dear to my heart and many folks living with HIV across the country and internationally for that matter. I am extremely honored and grateful to have someone who's become a hero in my life, certainly a mentor, and someone who has spearheaded the U equals U movement across the world, and that's my good friend, Bruce Richman. Bruce, thanks for being on the show
today. Hi, Randy. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, I want to start with what U equals U is all about, how it started, why it started, and when it started. So just give us some background, because you and I both know very much about the U equals U movement, you certainly more than I do, but I think our viewers and a number of folks out there still unfortunately don't know what it's all about.
Okay, so if you don't know U equals U, I'm going to tell you what U equals U is. U equals U means that a person living with HIV who is on treatment and has an undetectable viral load cannot transmit HIV through sex. And undetectable means that the virus in our bodies is so low, it's suppressed so low by the drugs that it can't be measured, so it's undetectable. And that keeps us healthy and means we can't transmit HIV. Now, I learned that, as you know, in 2012, because I had a doctor who was really well connected to the medical establishment, but nobody was really talking about it back then. People knew about it, but some people knew about it, some people didn't. But the folks who did know about it, many were afraid to share the news with people with HIV, with our community, because they were worried about what would happen on a population level. Right. So individually, they might tell their patients that, clinicians and people in public health might tell their patients, but in terms of getting this out and the message out to the public, they were worried about two things. One was, there's already a rise of STDs or STIs, and this would promote condomless sex. And so you have people like us are going to stop using condoms. There's going to be a big rise of STIs. Now we know that's something totally different. Whether or not someone who is undetectable can or cannot transmit HIV has nothing to do with STIs. This is a fact. It's a proven fact. Yep. STI. This is all about control and paternalism. That we're going to control this group of people and keep them in a state of fear so that they don't spread other STIs. And then the second one is what's called the unsophisticated consumer. So it means, in a sense, people with HIV are too stupid.
Right.
So that people with HIV wouldn't understand that in order to stay undetectable, you need to take your medication. You need to take your medication as prescribed, and you'll stay untransmittable.
Because only stupid people get HIV.
Right. It's just that preconception of us that we're irresponsible, and and some of us that we deserve it. So the unsophisticated consumer argument was that, if you let people tell this on a wide scale, there's going to be a lot of people who won't understand, and they're going to think they're undetectable when they're not, and they're going to spread HIV. So this is all unacceptable to us. But this is what I was hearing, for the few years after I learned that I learned U equals U. And that's really why I started this, is because it's not fair that privileged people like myself, who are really well connected, the medical establishment, that people like myself were learning, and the communities that are already marginalized by the healthcare systems, that are not responsive to their needs, are even further marginalized because they weren't getting this information. So it was around 2015 when I decided that this is what I needed to do. I needed to make sure that this information got out to everyone living with HIV and to the public. And I organized with other people with HIV. I found some amazing people and the researchers from the big studies that prove U equals U. And we created a consensus statement that would clear up the mixed messages about U equals U and confirm that it was indeed true. And then we created a video of the voices of people with HIV, demanding that we have this information, that all of us have this information. And so we took that statement and the video and our voices to go and change the narrative about our bodies. This was in the summer of 2016.
Right.
And the idea was, as you know, was to engage influential people and organizations to join us, to sign on and confirm what we knew was true. And that's when it launched, 2016, summer. And it was a battle. It was a struggle for truth, but we found a lot of heroes and sheroes, and like you, and Bob Leahy in Canada, and folks who in Brittany who really stood up and fought hard for the truth and to get this message out. And as you know, Katie was the first major research resource organization in the world to get behind this, and really help set U equals U on an international trajectory. So I say the campaign was born in New York City with the New York City Department of Health, right. and then it grew up in Canada with Katie.
Yeah, you do seem to have an affinity for Canada, and coming here seems to bring a little more joy to your heart than some other places that you have to endure. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Canada and England and Vietnam, these are places where it's really flourishing, where the U equals, and in all, it's 99 countries now. So there are many countries where it's flourishing, but these are places that I've been working with the most. I live in the United States. I live in New York. Fortunately, I live in a city and a state that gets it, understands U equals U, and the public health departments really are very active in that state. But I've stepped back, from my work in the United States because I felt someone else could be more effective at getting the national HIV and AIDS organizations to get off their hands and do something, at least update their websites, right. Things like that.
That's someone else being Murray Penner.
Yeah, I'm very happy.
So tell us a little bit about how Murray got involved.
Oh, this is like a dream. So Murray Penner used to be the head of National Association of State and Territorial AIDS Directors, right? And this is one of the most powerful organizations in the U.S., right. HIV/AIDS organizations. It's all this, public health directors, so it's a huge network. And he was the executive director. And when we launched the campaign in the summer of 2016, Murray was liking my comments on Facebook. And I clicked on, that's a good-looking guy. Let me click on there. And
Murray looks a lot like me, by the way.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
So I clicked on there, and it said that he was the executive director of NASTAD, and I said, wow, that's big. I need to know this guy. So we started communicating on Facebook, and New York City had just signed on. It was like August 2016, and I told Murray about the campaign, and he said, this is great. And he actually introduced me to the key person in the federal health departments that where we started that conversation. And I can tell you about that in a minute. But and Murray just signed on. He didn't even talk to his board. He didn't even ask his board of directors. Wow. He just did it. He just went for it. And that's courage. And I remember thinking, this is the kind of guy that I want to work with. This is the kind of guy, I'll get choked up because now I'm working with him. It was like a miracle. To have that kind of guts, to care that much about people living with HIV, and to know how urgent it was to get this message out, yeah. and to cut through all the, can I swear or no?
No, probably not.
No, to cut through all the BS in the field. Amazing. So he signed on at the big U.S. conference on AIDS, signed on NASTAD in September 2016, and now he's running U equals U North America, PAC North America, and has already done miracles in like 3 months. It's incredible, and I have to keep remembering that. Don't get involved, Bruce. Don't get involved. Okay, you see that newsletter that came out that's all about PrEP and nothing about U equals U from one of the big agencies. Don't get angry. Don't get involved. Step back.
Leave it to
Murray will take care of it. And I think because it happens a lot in the U.S. It's almost like it's like Stranger Things.
Mm-hmm. The upside down.
Canada's up here, and the United States is the upside down mostly. Mostly. There's still also really great organizations that are doing terrific work too. I'm not that. It's just,
and as much as we idolize Canada,
yeah,
there's a lot of Canada that's still stuck in the upside down as well.
Yeah,
when we look at our statistics for new infections and our efforts to end transmission are not nearly where it should be compared to countries like the UK, for example. So
the UK is like, I would say it is not. It's not a dream. It's a wet dream for U equals U. It is so good. It is so good. Every time I go there, I just like, are you people for real? Is this real?
Yeah.
And then I go home and I actually get depressed every time I go back to New York because I feel so sad for, I really feel sad for hundreds of thousands of people with HIV in the United States they're really getting shafted by our own organizations and by our own leadership who, supposedly represent them. It's just, it's really sad. I mean, you go to England and they have Positively UK, right? It's a 20-person staffed organization for people with HIV. They have peer outreach, they have speakers bureaus, they do advocacy, it's everything. And they only have 100,000 people living with HIV in the UK. Now, we have 1.1 million in the United States, and we don't even have a national organization. We have a really great Positive Women's Network for activism, and they're so good at what they do. There just isn't anything kind of, and there needs to be. There is a group that sort of.
Well, and it's particularly frustrating when you have a country like the UK that has that model that's already there.
Right.
It's not a matter of having to reinvent the wheel. It's just taking what we know is working and what we see is making a difference and translating that into either the US or the Canadian market.
Right.
And we're seeing that Katie's doing a lot of work very similar to the Terrence Higgins Trust, and in conjunction with Terrence Higgins Trust with the Can't Pass It On campaign.
Yeah.
And realizing the impact of that in the UK and saying, okay, let's do the same thing. We don't have to call it anything different. We can still call it Can't Pass It On and run the similar platforms that they did in the UK here in Canada to hopefully have that same impact. And it boggles my mind that we're not seeing more of that. When we see the success stories in other areas, just duplicate it.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree. I think that's a really, what's going on with Terrence Higgins Trust and Katie is an example of what we hope would happen with our network of now 950 partners. We are seeing that. We saw a group in Vietnam where there's the best national K equals K program, actually replicated a video that Vive produced in the UK. Right. Nothing to see here. Is living with HIV is just living.
Yeah, very powerful.
So we're seeing that. I guess it's just it's very much, we need to look at innovation and we need to welcome innovation in the field. We need to welcome innovators. We need to welcome everyone, regardless of their background, in the field in the United States, and to think that we're not we have a lot to learn from other countries. We really do, and we have some plans for that. I probably can't say this online about how we can bring some of the stuff over to the U.S.
Well, I'm excited for learning more about that after the show.
In private.
Yes. But eventually that will become public, and hopefully it'll be huge. Despite all the science, and there is solid, indisputable science behind what it means to be undetectable, there is still pushback from not only scientists and healthcare professionals who should know better because they're all about being based on science, but also from within the HIV community itself. Folks that say that U equals U doesn't apply to me for whatever reason, whether it be, I don't have access to treatment, I don't have access to care. I'll never be able to achieve an undetectable status. What do we say to folks like that who are within our own community that are fighting this message? And what do you say to those people?
Okay, well, I think that the issue around access is really important, because I think it's not well understood that what's called the public health argument of U equals U, and this is something that we've been talking about since January of 2017, is that, as when looking at folks in the United States, for instance, there are 500,000 of people living with HIV who are not in treatment and care and are not undetectable. That's a lot of people. Only half the people in the United States are undetectable. So we really need to focus on that 500,000 first and foremost. And the way that we've been focusing on them up to now has been in our advocacy. We go to Capitol Hill, we say to policymakers, we need increased funding for services, for housing, for employment, for all sorts of access to services to get us to a place where we can become undetectable if we choose, right? For our well-being. So that was the reason. It was for our well-being, right. The well-being of people with HIV. Now, what I learned in this field in a very short period of time is that a lot of policymakers don't care about our well-being, but they are focused on prevention. So now we can go to Capitol Hill and address the issue of treatment access and say, we need treatment and services and care for our well-being. And if you invest in people with HIV, you invest in the health of people with HIV by providing all these treatment and services, we won't transmit HIV anymore.
Right.
That's the foundation for being able to end the epidemic. Invest in the health of people with HIV. Get us the services and the care we all deserve to get to undetectable. And so we've really struggled with that because we've had people even yell at me at a conference. You know, people that you have no idea that people don't have access to treatment. And I'm like, I do, and I understand what you're saying, and we need to use this as an argument to get access to treatment, not silence it, not shame people for saying it. And we had a lot of that for the first 2 years in the United States. And I think we're at a turning point. I think people are now understanding that public health argument, and I think they're going to start using it on Capitol Hill. Till now, they really haven't, actually. Right. And it's a shame, and it's actually bad for people with HIV.
Absolutely.
It's shortchanging your own community when you go to a policymaker and you just say, we need treatment and care for the well-being of people with HIV.
Yeah.
That's a quarter of the argument. 3/4 of the argument is because this will get us to the end of the epidemic, right. which is the goals, especially under our new hideous president. But at least we have, the plan for America to end the epidemic. So this fits in perfectly.
Yes. Well, and we talk about all those things, and you speak of it from a U.S. perspective, and we have all those same issues here in Canada as well, and governments that are not as supportive, certainly provincially, here in Ontario to a certain degree. We're about to have a federal election that could change the tides and align us more closely to the thinking of the presidency in the U.S. So these are all concerns right across the sector that we all have. And I think just for a little bit of background for the viewers, you and I first met, would have been the spring of 2017 when I came to Ottawa to see you speak at a community forum that the AIDS Committee of Ottawa put on. And I remember coming up to you after I wasn't brave enough to actually speak and ask a question during the forum. But what struck me in reviewing the folks who had signed on up to that point anyway to the consensus statement was that there wasn't a single Pride organization that had signed on. And I found that strange in that Pride and Pride organizations essentially representing those who are most affected by HIV, and to not have a voice in the movement seemed really strange to me. And I do remember asking you and Bob Leahy the question, why? Why is that? Why aren't Prides? And I think you both said, I don't know. We really don't know why. And I made it my mission when I left Ottawa and went back to Barrie to ensure that the Barrie Pride organization became the first Pride organization to sign on to the consensus statement. And I made a promise to you that I wasn't going to stop there. And that's when you graciously gave me the honorary title of the Pride Coordinator for the U Equals U campaign. So that was certainly my focus then, and to a certain degree it still is. And I think we've seen from Barrie Pride signing on a number of Pride organizations that really started to snowball after that, right up to Toronto Pride signing on and endorsing and actually going a step beyond and promoting it. I know the year that Barrie Pride signed on, we had Bob Leahy and Brittany Cameron as our Grand Marshals for the Pride Parade, and then the following Pride in Ottawa, you were the Grand Marshal, and I was fortunate enough to be asked to come and join the B team and got branded as Brandy for that occasion, and that was actually part of the community forum. And I remember I remember speaking with you folks before we went on for the forum and realizing that day that we spoke at Ottawa Pride was a full 6 months from the day that I'd met each of you.
Wow.
And it just
happened
smacked
so
me in
fast.
the face that it happened so fast, and that I'd been welcomed into this arena of advocacy with what had been total strangers that had really become family for me. And that's really powerful, and has given me an opportunity to do more and speak out more and sort of shift my focus now towards public health. And while I wasn't the only one involved, I think some of the work that I did through the Pride committees helped to steer our local health unit into being the first health unit in Canada to endorse the campaign, which was soon followed by Ottawa and Toronto and some of the other public health agencies in Canada. Still not enough. That's certainly where the focus needs to be, and making sure that that message of a public health emergency out there and U equals U being the answer to that emergency needs to continue to be shouted loudly. That started with me just driving to Ottawa to meet my hero. And that's just been so amazing to me that all the things in the 2+ years that I've known you, a very short period of time, but the impact that Prevention Access and U equals U has had on my life personally and has allowed me to share with others is immeasurable.
That's really nice to hear. And your work has been so impressive. You have just been like wildfire. Your work it's been really incredible to see the prides that you've gotten involved and how active you are on social media and bringing me here. And I mean, in this massive campaign that you're doing cross country, I'm really impressed. And I think that this whole campaign, a lot of this movement, it's been like magic. You know, it really has. For 3 years, for this concept, or let's call it a brand, U equals U, for this to have expanded in 3 years to 99 countries, driven by us. This is nothing about us without us on a massive global scale. This is MIPA like amplified like we've never seen, you know, and it's you know, all around the world, people living with HIV are pushing their federal health ministries or their AIDS organizations, their leaders, their communications agencies, journalists, to tell the truth about us. And so it's mad. To me, it's been magic. You know, it's been magic. There's so many incredible things when you focus on the positive. When people, you know, the two of us came together and we're so aligned. You know, I do believe that, you know, there's a universal benevolent force that helps guide us through all this, because it sometimes it's so surreal. I can't believe it's real.
Well, and I'm almost glad you said that word, universal, because that's another focus of the U equals U campaign that for a lot of folks is relatively new. I know, having the pleasure of sitting on the International Steering Committee, thanks to Bob Lee, who tapped me on the shoulder and said, we need Randy on this committee as well. Getting that message out has become, I think, a real driving force for some of the naysayers out there as well, and ensuring that folks are aware of that third U. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about the third U, universal, and what that means for the campaign?
The third U, well, we used to call it third U unequal, and that was actually created by Marcia Martin. I met with her at International AIDS Society in 2017 in the summer, and we had this long conversation, and she came up, it was a really great conversation actually. She came up with it. We changed it to third U as universal, because Carl Liffenbach suggested that, who's the head of the Division of AIDS, and he's a communications, you know, genius and runs the Division of AIDS. But so you know, the concept is kind of like what we talked about earlier about you know, access to treatment, that everyone, you know, U equals U needs to be a revolution that includes everyone, and so we, you know, organically it is. I mean, it certainly is. Even in Venezuela, there's an I equals I program, and if anyone understands a lack of access to treatment and antibiotics and basic needs like toilet paper, it's people in Venezuela right now, and they've embraced I equals I, their program. I mean, we met in Mexico City with some people from Venezuela, a clinician and people with HIV, and they were crying. We were both crying about how much this meant to them. So organically, this is in places in many parts of the world that have terribly, terribly devastating, tragic lack of access to basic needs and care. And they're using this to bring hope, to destigmatize what it means to live with HIV, to use it in their advocacy for access to treatment or more sensitive or viral load testing or just basic viral load testing. But there are some folks who are still very not concerned, understandably, that this won't help people who don't have access to treatment, and it does. As I was saying earlier, we need to use this. First, there's several reasons. One is just it's basic information everybody needs to know. Anyone needs to know who's living with HIV, regardless of your circumstances.
Yep.
Number two, it may bring people hope, like we're seeing in Venezuela, something to aspire to. Number three, it's creating this new surge of activism. That look, if you get us all the basic, treatment and care and services we need to get to undetectable, we can end the epidemic. Okay, so not only will it save our lives, but we can end the epidemic that way. So it's really important for universal. And that's really what our focus is, in the United States and also elsewhere, is how do we address and reach the 500,000? How do we reach the 500,000? Let's use this in our advocacy on Capitol Hill immediately. Let's tell policymakers and other influencers that you've got to invest in the health of people living with HIV if you want to end the epidemic. That's the best way to end the epidemic, is invest in our health.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the important part of that advocacy piece is getting back to what advocacy is supposed to be, and getting loud and getting angry when you need to, and making sure that your voice is heard, and not allowing it to be pushed aside, or to have people make excuses or not tell the truth. And as you point out in some of the slides that you say, if you won't tell the truth, we'll tell it for you.
We'll tell it for you. Exactly.
And the truth is always better coming from the horse's mouth than someone else telling it. So
exactly. I mean, we're definitely seeing people, patients living with HIV, educating their providers and saying, why didn't you tell me that? And then they're firing their providers, or it's just breaking that trust between patient and provider, which we know is really bad for treatment outcomes and for engagement in care. So we are telling the truth. And in terms of, advocacy, activism is complicated in the United States, at least. I think there's, a lot of us carry wounds and rocks, hurt people, right? And I think sometimes folks don't know where to throw the rocks, so they throw it at each other. And, I think we're now in the place where there'll be less of that sort of fighting and more working together, especially with my colleague Murray on board, who's a real peacemaker.
I mean, and that's great. We do have the core group of activists and advocates that are part of the Prevention Access Campaign, are just an amazing group of folks. And I wish I'd had an opportunity, and I hope to in the future, to actually physically get to meet some of these folks as opposed to just virtual friendships. But I am so grateful that you have taken the time to be with me this afternoon to talk about these issues and to be on the program. It means a great deal to me. You are an amazing man. You are a great friend. And we're going to have to stop now because I'm going to start to get teary. Thank you very much for being on the show, Bruce.
Thank you, Randy.
Really, it means the world to me.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you, folks, for watching again this week and seeing me blubber up a little bit. There'll probably be more of that in the future. But tune in next week for another episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer with Randy Davis.